The autumn rain hammered against the tall windows of Kensington Palace, as 8-year-old Princess Charlotte pressed her small face against the cold glass. Her breath created tiny clouds that quickly disappeared, just like her hopes of seeing her mother today. Catherine, the Princess of Wales, had been rushed to the hospital 3 days ago after collapsing during a charity event. The doctors said she needed complete rest and no visitors were allowed, not even her children. Charlotte's world had suddenly become very quiet and scary. Prince William had been at the hospital constantly, leaving early in the morning and returning late at night with tired eyes and forced smiles. Her brothers, Prince George and Prince Louis, seemed to understand something was seriously wrong, but nobody would tell Charlotte exactly what was happening. The adults around her spoke in hushed whispers and gave her sympathetic looks that made her stomach feel heavy. The young princess had always been close to her mother. Catherine was not just the future queen to Charlotte. She was the person who braided her hair every morning, read bedtime stories with funny voices, and always knew exactly what to say when Charlotte felt sad or confused. Now, with her mother gone and her father barely present, Charlotte felt completely lost in the grand palace that suddenly seemed too big and too empty. Mrs. Rodriguez, her nanny, had tried everything to cheer her up. They had baked cookies, painted pictures, and even watched Charlotte's favorite Disney movies, but nothing could fill the aching hole in her heart. Charlotte kept asking the same questions over and over. When is Mummy coming home? And is Mummy going to be okay? The answers were always the same vague responses about Mummy needing to rest and get better. That afternoon, Charlotte had been particularly difficult. She refused to eat her lunch, threw her toys across the playroom, and even yelled at Prince Louis when he tried to share his building blocks with her. The guilt of being mean to her little brother made her feel even worse, but she could not control the angry, scared feelings bubbling inside her chest. Mrs. Rodriguez had gently suggested that Charlotte might feel better if she got some fresh air in the palace gardens. The gardens were usually Charlotte's favorite place. She loved running through the maze, picking flowers for her mother and playing hide-and-seek among the tall hedges. But today, even the beautiful autumn colors could not lift her spirits. The crisp air stung her cheeks, and the crunching leaves under her feet sounded too loud in the strange silence that had settled over her life. As Charlotte wandered aimlessly through the paths she knew so well, she found herself near the main entrance where the royal guard stood at their posts. She had always been fascinated by these tall, serious men in their perfect red uniforms and impressive bearskin hats. Her mother had taught her that they were there to protect the royal family, and Charlotte had always felt safe knowing they were watching over her home. Today, however, even their reassuring presence could not comfort her troubled heart. Guard Thomas Mitchell had been standing at his post for nearly 4 hours, maintaining the perfect stillness that his position required. At 32 years old, he had served in the Queen's Guard for 8 years and took immense pride in his duty to protect the royal family. Thomas had grown up in a small village outside London, and becoming a royal guard had been his childhood dream. He understood the importance of protocol and had never once broken his stance during duty hours. However, Thomas was also a father. His own daughter, Emily, was 7 years old, just 1 year younger than Princess Charlotte. Every morning when he put on his uniform, Thomas thought about how he was not just protecting the royal family, but also ensuring a safe world for his own little girl. This personal connection made his duty feel even more meaningful, though he never allowed his emotions to show while on guard. Over the years, Thomas had watched Princess Charlotte grow from a curious toddler into a bright, spirited young girl. He had seen her take her first wobbly steps in the palace gardens, watched her learn to ride her bicycle with training wheels, and observed her gentle interactions with her younger brother. Unlike some royals who seemed distant and untouchable, Charlotte had always struck Thomas as remarkably normal and kind-hearted for someone born into such extraordinary circumstances. From his position, Thomas had noticed that something was different about the palace atmosphere over the past few days. There were more serious conversations among the staff. Additional security measures had been quietly implemented, and the usual joyful sounds of children playing had been replaced by an unusual quiet. He had heard whispers among the other guards about the Princess of Wales being hospitalized. Though official information was kept strictly confidential, Thomas had also noticed that Princess Charlotte had not been her usual cheerful self. During his shifts, he had seen her walking through the gardens with slumped shoulders and a sad expression that seemed far too heavy for such a young child. Her normally bright eyes looked dim, and she moved with none of the energetic bounce that usually characterized her step. It broke his heart to see her this way, but protocol demanded that he remain focused on his duties and not interact with the royal family unless specifically required. As he stood at attention that gray afternoon, Thomas could see Princess Charlotte approaching the main entrance. She was walking slowly, dragging her feet through the fallen leaves, and he could tell even from a distance that she had been crying. Her usually neat hair was messy from the wind, and her small hands were clenched into tight fists at her sides. She looked smaller than usual, almost fragile, and Thomas felt his paternal instincts stirring despite his professional training. The young princess stopped about 10 feet away from where Thomas stood and looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. For a moment they simply looked at each other, the seasoned guard in his magnificent uniform and the heartbroken child in her simple play clothes. Thomas could see the pain and confusion written across her face, and he recognized the same look he had seen in his own daughter's eyes when she was scared or hurt. Every fiber of his being wanted to comfort her, but years of training kept him perfectly still and silent. Charlotte stood in front of the guard, studying his kind face beneath the impressive bearskin hat. She had seen him many times before during her walks in the gardens, and something about his presence had always made her feel safe. Unlike some of the other guards who seemed stern and unapproachable, this one had gentle eyes that reminded her of her grandfather. Even though he never moved or spoke while on duty, Charlotte had always sensed warmth in his expression. The weight of the past few days suddenly felt too heavy for her small shoulders to carry alone. Charlotte had been trying so hard to be brave, to be the good princess everyone expected her to be. But she was tired of pretending that everything was okay. She missed her mother desperately, and the scary thoughts about what might happen kept swirling in her mind no matter how hard she tried to push them away. Taking a shaky breath, Charlotte stepped closer to the guard. She knew that she was not supposed to bother the guards while they were working, but she felt so alone and confused that she needed someone, anyone, to listen to her. Her voice came out as barely more than a whisper when she finally spoke. "Excuse me," she said, looking up at the tall man in the red uniform. "I know you're not supposed to talk while you're working, but I really need to tell someone how scared I am." The words tumbled out of her mouth before she could stop them. "My mummy is in the hospital and nobody will tell me if she's going to be okay. Daddy keeps saying that everything will be fine, but I can see in his eyes that he's scared too. I tried to be brave like Mummy taught me, but I don't know how to be brave when I don't understand what's happening. I just want my mummy to come home and read me stories and help me with my homework like she always does." Charlotte's voice began to crack as the emotions she had been holding inside for days finally broke free. "I heard Mrs. Rodriguez talking on the phone, and she said that Mummy might have to stay in the hospital for a very long time. What if she forgets about me while she's there? What if she doesn't remember how we like to have tea parties in the garden or how she promised to teach me to bake her special chocolate cake?" Tears began streaming down Charlotte's cheeks as all her fears poured out. "I know I'm a princess and I'm supposed to be strong, but I'm just a little girl who misses her mummy. I don't want to live in this big palace without her. I don't want to eat dinner without her asking me about my day. I don't want to go to bed without her singing me the special song she made up just for me." Charlotte wiped her nose with the back of her sleeve and looked up at the guard with desperate, pleading eyes. "I know you can't leave your post and I know you're not supposed to talk to me, but could you please just nod if you think my mummy is going to come home soon? I promise I won't tell anyone that you broke the rules. I just need someone to help me feel less scared." Thomas felt his heart breaking as he listened to Princess Charlotte's tearful words. Every instinct he possessed as a father screamed at him to comfort this frightened child, but years of military training held him rigidly in place. The protocols were clear and absolute. Guards on duty were never to abandon their posts or engage in personal conversations with members of the royal family. Breaking these rules could result in immediate dismissal and the end of his military career. But as Thomas looked down at Charlotte's tear-streaked face, he saw his own daughter, Emily. He remembered the night when Emily had a terrible nightmare and needed him to hold her until she felt safe again. He thought about how devastating it would be for Emily if something happened to his wife, and how frightened and alone she would feel in such circumstances. The protocols that seemed so important moments ago suddenly felt meaningless compared to the very real pain of this 8-year-old girl standing before him. Charlotte's small hand slowly reached out toward him, her fingers barely grazing the red fabric of his uniform. Please, she whispered, her voice breaking with desperation. I just need someone to care that I'm scared. I need someone to tell me that everything really will be okay. Not just the things adults say to make children stop asking questions. In that moment, Thomas made a decision that would change both their lives forever. Slowly, carefully, he began to move. First, he shifted his weight slightly. Then he turned his head to look directly down at Charlotte. The movement was subtle but unmistakable. He was choosing to acknowledge her presence and her pain over his duty to remain perfectly still. Thomas could see the surprise and hope that flickered across Charlotte's face as she realized he was responding to her. He knew that other guards and palace staff might be watching, and he knew that his actions would likely have consequences, but he simply could not stand by and watch this child suffer alone. Sometimes, he realized, being a protector meant more than just standing guard against external threats. Very quietly, so that only Charlotte could hear, Thomas spoke in a gentle voice that reminded her of her grandfather reading bedtime stories. Your Royal Highness, he said softly, I want you to know that your mummy loves you more than anything in the world. She's fighting very hard to get better so she can come home to you and your brothers. The doctors and nurses are taking excellent care of her. Charlotte's eyes widened with amazement and relief. Here was an adult who was finally speaking to her honestly, treating her fears as real and important instead of dismissing them with empty reassurances. Do you really think she'll come home soon? Charlotte asked, her voice still shaky but filled with hope. Thomas nodded solemnly. I think your mummy is very strong, just like you are. And I think she misses you just as much as you miss her. Being in the hospital doesn't mean she loves you any less or that she'll forget about your special times together. Charlotte felt a wave of relief wash over her as the kind guard continued to speak in his gentle, reassuring voice. For the first time in days, an adult was treating her like she was capable of understanding the truth rather than protecting her from it. Would it be okay, she asked hesitantly, if I told you about my mummy? About all the special things we do together that I'm afraid she might forget while she's away. Thomas glanced around quickly to make sure they were not being closely observed, then nodded encouragingly. I would very much like to hear about your mummy, Your Royal Highness. Sometimes talking about the people we love helps us feel closer to them, even when they're not with us. Charlotte's face brightened slightly as she began to share her precious memories. Every morning, Mummy braids my hair and tells me a different story about a brave princess who goes on adventures. The princess always looks exactly like me, and she always solves problems by being kind and clever instead of using magic. Mummy says that real princesses don't need magic because they have something even more powerful. They have love and courage in their hearts. As Charlotte spoke, Thomas could see the love and admiration she felt for her mother shining through her tears. And every Tuesday we have special tea parties in the rose garden. Mummy lets me use the fancy china cups, and we pretend we're hosting important guests from faraway kingdoms. She always asks me about my week and listens to everything I say, even when I'm telling her about silly things like what happened during playtime or which books I'm reading. Charlotte wiped her eyes with her sleeve and continued. At bedtime, Mummy sings me a song she wrote just for me. It's about a little princess who lives in a castle by the sea, and how her mummy's love follows her everywhere she goes, even in her dreams. She says that no matter where we are or what happens, her love is always with me like an invisible hug that never goes away. Thomas felt deeply moved by Charlotte's words. He could hear the profound bond between mother and daughter in every sentence, and he understood why Charlotte was so frightened of losing these precious connections. Those sound like very special traditions, he said softly. And I can tell you something important about mummies. They never forget the special things they do with their children. Even when they're sick or far away, those memories stay in their hearts and make them feel strong. Charlotte looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes. Do you really think she remembers our tea parties and our songs while she's in the hospital? Do you think she's missing them as much as I am? Thomas knelt down slowly, bringing himself to Charlotte's eye level despite the risk of being seen breaking protocol. Your Royal Highness, I'm absolutely certain that your mummy thinks about you every single moment. She's probably lying in her hospital bed right now, remembering the sound of your laugh during tea parties and humming your special song to help herself feel better. As Thomas knelt beside Charlotte, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, slightly worn photograph. I want to show you something, he said gently, holding out the picture for Charlotte to see. This is my daughter Emily. She's 7 years old, just a bit younger than you. Charlotte took the photograph carefully in her small hands and studied the image of a smiling girl with curly brown hair and bright eyes. "She looks very nice," Charlotte said softly. "Does she live far away from here?" Thomas nodded. "She lives with my wife in our little house about an hour from the palace. When I have to work long shifts like this one, I miss her terribly, but I carry her picture with me always, and it helps me remember that even when we're apart, we're still connected by love, just like you and your mummy are connected." Charlotte handed the photograph back to Thomas, and he could see understanding dawning in her eyes. "So even though you're here protecting us, you're still Emily's daddy and she knows you love her?" "Exactly," Thomas smiled. "And even though your mummy is in the hospital getting better, she's still your mummy and she knows how much you love and miss her. Love doesn't disappear just because people are in different places." Charlotte felt something loosen in her chest, like a tight knot finally beginning to untangle. "Will you tell me more about Emily? What kinds of things do you do together when you're not working?" Thomas's face lit up as he spoke about his daughter. "Emily loves to draw pictures and leave them on my pillow so I'll find them when I come home from work. She draws everything: flowers, animals, our family, even pictures of me in my guard uniform. And just like you have tea parties with your mummy, Emily and I have special Saturday morning pancake breakfasts where we make funny shapes and tell silly jokes." "That sounds wonderful," Charlotte said, and for the first time in days she felt genuinely interested in something other than her own sadness. "Do you think Emily would like to be friends with me someday? I don't have very many friends who aren't grown-ups or other royals." Thomas felt touched by Charlotte's innocent question. "I think Emily would be absolutely delighted to be your friend, Your Royal Highness. She would probably be so excited that she'd want to draw you 100 pictures." Charlotte giggled softly, and the sound surprised them both. It was the first time she had laughed since her mother went to the hospital, and hearing it made Thomas feel like his decision to break protocol had been absolutely right. "I would like that very much," Charlotte said. "Maybe when Mummy comes home she could meet Emily too. Mummy always says that the best friends are the ones who make you feel happy just by being themselves." Thomas stood up slowly, knowing that their conversation would have to end soon, but grateful for the time they had shared. "Your mummy sounds like a very wise woman, and I'm sure she would love to meet Emily. You know what else I think? I think your mummy would be very proud of how brave you've been during this difficult time." As the afternoon light began to fade, Charlotte heard the familiar sound of footsteps approaching from behind. She turned to see Mrs. Rodriguez walking toward them with a concerned but understanding expression on her face. The nanny had been looking for Charlotte when she spotted the unusual sight of one of the guards kneeling and speaking with the young princess. "Princess Charlotte," Mrs. Rodriguez called gently, "I've been looking for you everywhere. It's time to come inside for dinner." Charlotte felt a moment of panic, worried that Mrs. Rodriguez would be angry about her bothering the guard during his duty, but as the nanny approached, Charlotte could see only kindness and understanding in her eyes. Mrs. Rodriguez had been caring for the royal children for several years, and she understood better than most how difficult the past few days had been for Charlotte. Thomas quickly stood at attention, preparing to face whatever consequences might come from his decision to break protocol. He had no regrets about comforting Charlotte, but he understood that his actions would likely be reported to his superiors. Mrs. Rodriguez approached them both with a gentle smile. "Thank you," Mrs. Rodriguez said quietly to Thomas, and her words surprised both him and Charlotte. "I can see that Princess Charlotte feels much better than when she left for her walk. Sometimes the most important duty is simply being kind to a child who needs comfort." Charlotte looked up at Thomas one more time before she had to leave. "Thank you for listening to me and for telling me about Emily. I feel much less scared now." "Will you be here tomorrow?" Thomas nodded. "I'll be here, Your Royal Highness. And remember what we talked about. Your mummy's love is always with you, even when she can't be." Charlotte surprised everyone, including herself, by reaching out and gently touching Thomas's hand. "I hope you get to see Emily soon, and I hope she knows what a special daddy she has." As Mrs. Rodriguez gently guided Charlotte toward the palace entrance, the young princess felt lighter than she had in days. The conversation with the kind guard had given her something precious, the understanding that love could bridge any distance, and that being scared didn't mean she had to be alone. 3 days later, Charlotte woke up to the most wonderful sound she had ever heard. Her father's voice in the hallway, excited and happy, talking about bringing someone home. Charlotte raced to her window and saw a familiar car pulling up the drive. Her heart nearly burst with joy when she saw her mother, looking tired but smiling, stepping out of the vehicle. As Charlotte ran through the palace corridors toward the entrance, she caught a glimpse of Thomas at his post. He gave her the tiniest nod and the smallest smile, and she knew he was sharing her happiness. Later that day, when she was snuggled safely in her mother's arms during their first tea party in over a week, Charlotte told Catherine all about the kind guard who had helped her feel brave when she needed it most. Catherine listened with tears in her eyes, understanding how much Thomas's kindness had meant to her daughter during the scariest time of her young life. That evening, she made sure that Thomas received a personal thank you note, acknowledging that sometimes the greatest service comes not from following rules, but from following one's heart.